Welcome to the podcast. You're listening to Spilling the Tea on Business. My name's Lucy Johnston, and today I am joined by the incredible Alice Benham. Welcome, Alice.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
I am very excited to have you here, and you're somebody that I have been learning from for quite a few years. So this is quite an exciting day for me. I'm going to do that thing at the beginning of a podcast where we say, please introduce yourself to people who don't know you and tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Amazing. Yes, I'm never that good at introducing myself, but who is? I feel like we all don't like this part, do we? So I always just think I'll explain it in the simplest way possible. I am Alice Benham. Lots of people call me AB, but Alice also works great. People can call me whatever they want. My official job title is I'm a business strategist. So that means that I get to spend my time helping business owners with their growth. I'm really all about helping people in a way that feels kind of intentional and sustainable for them. So I do a lot of work around building out strategies with your business model, your operations, your marketing, your goal setting. And I do that one-to-one with clients. And then there's a few other arms to the business. So I've got a stationery shop called On Paper. I've got my own podcast. I've now got a book. I run retreats. I run various events. So there's quite a few different things going on, but they're all under that umbrella of kind of helping business owners grow. And yeah, help people to take action. That's really what it's all about. So yeah, that is me.
That is a lot going on. That is absolutely brilliant. You're like adding all these things. I'm like, wow, this is all incredible. What I like to do, because I work with lots of people who, the podcast is around like people who are starting their business or starting to grow. Mm-hmm. And I like to take people on that journey of, it isn't that you started yesterday and now you have a book, you speak at big events, you've got a podcast, you do all these wonderful things. We kind of like to see the realities behind it of actually, there was a few steps before there. There was quite a few steps, quite a few years of learning. So can you just tell us a little bit about your history?
For sure. And I love that you asked this question, Lucy, because I feel the exact same way. You know, it's so easy, isn't it, to see someone's, chapter 20 or chapter 50 and to think, oh my gosh, they woke up with that, or they've always had that. And I used to feel that way, and I still feel that way, right? I don't think we ever reach a point where we feel like, oh, I've made it. You know, there's always someone at the next point that's where you want to get to. And I always have to remind myself, anyone that's got a bit of what I want was at one point where I was, not having that thing, wishing for it, taking the action. And oh my gosh, were there so many years of my business where it didn't feel like anything was kind of clicking into place. A bit of backstory on kind of my journey into business. I was a very accidental entrepreneur, as I think many people are. I was 17 years old. I said yes to a freelance job that I didn't really understand meant running a business. I became a social media manager, and then really my kind of business journey has snowballed from there over the last kind of 8 or 9 years. So interestingly, the kind of first year of my business, it was quite quick growth. I credit a lot of that to my 17-year-old self being very naive and enthusiastic, and she just threw herself at everything. But I burnt out pretty quickly after about a year. And actually, when I then came back to business, and my whole intention then was, how do I rebuild more intentionally, more sustainably? That was where the slow growth really felt like it kicked in. Yeah. I really believe businesses will grow at different paces, and there's no right or wrong. But if there's one thing I've seen throughout all the clients and the friends that I've got that run amazing businesses, it's that something good takes time. And it's so hard when you're in it, isn't it? But I remember back in those early days, like I think for about 3 years, I paid myself like £200 a month, which was like at the time, fine. I was living at home. I had the privilege of living with my parents. I didn't need a lot of money, but like, if that doesn't put it into perspective, like 3 years of the business not really paying me a decent wage in any way. I think it took about a year, just under a year, to get my first paying client. So I didn't have a paying client for almost a year. So I had to keep showing up in that time. My podcast took a lot of time to get off the ground. Like there's just so many things where I think, gosh, it really has snowballed. Like what I have the privilege of doing now, of like, various opportunities and speaking at events and the book. I'm like, wow, like I don't know if my past self even dreamed of this, because there were times where it just felt so hard. And there's times now where it feels so hard, right? That does never end. And there's always another thing you want to get to. But yeah, there's been a lot of years of really just feeling like nothing was happening, but trusting that if I kept showing up, kept trying to learn, kept trying to experiment, maybe something would happen. So yeah, I could tell many, many more stories of those days. And like I said, the hard days haven't ended. They've just changed shape. But yeah, it's a big part.
Oh my God. You said so many things that I'm like, yeah, I need to ask you about that. And then it just kept coming at them. And I'm like, wow, because that is one of the things that people, like you said, people see your chapter 20 and they're like, oh, well, it's easy for you because you're finding it easy because you've got all of this other stuff, but actually when you kind of go beneath the surface, there are all of these steps that you've taken. There's burnout, there's questions, there's low income months, years, there's things that you've tried and failed. So during all of that time, how did you sort of push through and carry on going? Because I think there's going to be times for everybody when you get to that point and you're like, oh, I'm not sure if this is working, how do I push through? Or how did you at those times that were when you were struggling?
I think a couple of things. The big thing was I kept just bringing it back to my why.
Yeah.
And I think of why in business, and Lucy, you'll probably be familiar with this, the times we've spoken about it before, is there being kind of two sides to it. So there's your internal why, which is all about why you run a business for you. So what does it do for you? What do you love about it? And then there's the external why, that's all about your impact and your legacy and who you help. And I found at every point in business where things have got sticky, if I bring myself back to those two things and go, right, why am I doing this? That always helps, especially I think in the early days. The internal why couldn't really be about, having loads of flexibility or money, because it just wasn't at that point yet. Actually, at that point, my internal why was kind of just like, I'm loving building this thing. I'm loving having control over what I do when. I'm loving being challenged. I am probably one of the worst advocates for running a business. When I'm at a party or meeting people and we'll talk about what we do, and maybe they're starting to talk about wanting to start a business, I think the expectation would be that I'm stood there being like, do it. Yes, it's the best thing. And I will always tell people, if you've got the nudge to do it, do it. Always try. But I guess what I mean when I say I'm the worst advocate is I'm the one that will be like, do you really want to do it? Really? Would not doing it make you feel like there's a part of you that you haven't uncovered? I think that's almost how you've got to feel about your thing, because it's so hard.
Yeah,
so
it's not an easy choice. It's not the easy choice at all. Yeah.
So you've got to have that real inner drive, haven't you? And for me, the inner drive in the early days couldn't be about making money or getting shiny opportunities, because that just wasn't happening. Yeah. But my inner drive at the start was like, wow, I'm just loving learning. I'm loving being challenged. I'm loving meeting new people. And so I think you've got to keep bringing it back to why am I doing this? And also I think a big part of this, and I did have these conversations with myself as well, is being really honest about at what point you do stop.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think we hear that talked about enough, do we? People will just say, keep showing up, keep being consistent. You never want to do that at the expense of then your mental, physical health, your well-being. And so I always knew, okay, if it doesn't pick up by this point, I might reconsider. I had a really clear idea of when I wanted to move out of my parents' house. And I knew if I'm not able to pay myself a salary by then, I think I will rethink this business thing, because I don't want to be, 35 living at home, just still waiting for that business to take off, having not maybe taken the hint that it wasn't quite working.
Still on your £200.
And 35 for me would have been 18 years on. Yeah. So that would have been a lot of it. So yeah, I think it's a balance, isn't it? You've got to know when to lean in and keep going and know what helps you to do that. But there's also a valid conversation around knowing when it's time. And I think that's true of projects. It doesn't need to be about your whole business. I often struggle to stop just a project because you get so attached to it. But yeah, it's tough, isn't it? How did you find that kind of in your early days of helping yourself to lean in?
I think it's definitely that, that internal why, like you said, and that I actually really love the work that I do. I want to be pushing through. And I was also lucky that I was supported by my husband's salary for the first couple of years. So I had that time of learning and enjoying and learning how to build a website, and I spent some time doing that. And so to me it was a bit of a hobby for the first sort of 2 years of, right, let's learn about automations and CRMs and how you do all of this stuff, and let's learn about a social media platform, and really sort of dived in. And then it kind of got serious of, actually, I need to be making money now, and I need to be learning more about strategy and how I can put things in place and where to go from here. So I think this is actually a good point to then ask you. I've learned a lot about strategy from you. So for my listeners who are maybe at that point where they're like, right, I know who I like to work with, I know what I like to do, but some stuff isn't working and I'm sort of guessing at every point of, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? In terms of building out a strategy, could you help us with a couple of steps that you take with your clients of, right, let's start building a strategy and let's get more serious with our business?
Absolutely. I think step one of building any strategy is actually removing the pressure that we put on ourselves when we create strategies. I say this as a strategist. I don't love the word, because it creates this weird feeling of overwhelm, doesn't it? Someone says to you, you know, have you got an idea of what you do with your marketing? And you go, yeah. And then they go, well, have you got a marketing strategy?
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, you know, I don't have that. That sounds fancy. That sounds complicated. That sounds like something I can't do. And like, that really, really frustrates me, because the second we find strategy overwhelming is the second we don't do it and therefore access the benefits of it. If you Google the word strategy, which I've done many times because I often question whether I really know what I'm talking about, it's reality, right?
I love it.
What will come up every time you ask, what is the dictionary definition of strategy? It is simply a plan with an end goal in mind. So when you hear someone say, what's your marketing strategy? They're just saying, what's the plan for your marketing that might achieve your goals? Or if someone says, what's your business strategy? It's just like, what's the plan of what you're doing with your business to get it to where you want it to go? So if we understand strategy through that lens, I think we realize it doesn't need to be complex or detailed. I get paid a decent amount of money to sit and build strategies with people. I have never once then delivered a 55-page PDF or a complex document. Often what I deliver looks very simple. And that's because strategies should be simple, because the goal of a strategy is not to have one, it's to use one. So I think we need that mindset throughout. We can get really wrapped up making strategies. You know, my workshops that are about making a strategy get so much more interest than the ones I do about implementing one. And that to me says where our focus is off.
Yeah.
Having a strategy won't change your business, implementing it will. So I think we need to think about not how do I create a strategy for the sake of it, but how do I build a strategy in a way that's going to work for me?
Yes.
And obviously that looks different for everyone, but the general steps to follow is, you know, if we think about strategy, plan, end goal in mind, first thing we need to know is the end goal. So before we sit down and go, oh, I'm going to do this and that and this and that, it's like, okay, no, why? What's the big vision? What's the North Star? We don't need to know where our business is going to be in 5 years, but we should know what the rough kind of guiding vision is of where we're heading. Once we've got the clarity on that, then we can just get to the plan part. And the biggest thing about building a strategy when you're building the plan part of it is not letting yourself do things from a place of should. Yeah. You know, a strategy is not, oh, Lucy has a podcast and I just heard that Alice has one as well, so I should have a podcast. I'm going to start one.
Yes.
That's not strategic. Being strategic would be going, okay, what could a podcast do for my business? Are those things that I need right now? Yes. Okay, I'm going to do a podcast in a certain way that achieves those certain goals.
Yes.
So it's not complex, it's not super different. It's just making sure that you do it with intention and don't do it to have a strategy, do it to use a strategy. That is honestly, I think, the biggest mistake that we make. And then we build these lovely PDFs that gather dust and get chucked in a hard drive and never get used, which I don't know about you, Lucy. I would rather sit and watch Netflix than sit and make a PDF that's going to spend its life in a folder.
Exactly that. And I think from what you said, I've been wanting to start a podcast for about 3 years, and it just wasn't the right time. And until this year, and I was like, right, no, now all the stars are aligning. This is where I want to be going, and I'm doing it now. Whereas I've got lots of different things of, you know, membership, courses, retreats. But if I sat down and was like, right, yeah, I'm going to do all of those today, it just isn't feasible. So like you said, focus on that end goal, see what that end goal is, and take your first steps with it. So we've got an idea, we've got our first step, we've got the right mindset, which is totally take action and not just have a lovely laminated, lovely in your brand colors, all the lovely PDF that you can sort of stick up on the wall. If it stays there, there's no point. It's about taking the action. So we've got our goal, we were in the right mindset. What are the next steps that we can take?
Well, the next steps is then getting into that place of action, I think. You know, I often separate for people the difference between internal and external action. Internal action is you're learning, you're planning, you're clarifying, you're researching, you're strategizing. Very needed, first step. But really where we need to spend most of our time as business owners is the external action, which is obviously the stuff that actually changes a business. Yes. External action is what will create growth. And the biggest mindset, I think, to have with your external action, I guess there's two things I'd touch on here for people. First of all, ask the question, what's going to get in the way of me taking action? And then see what you can do about that. I think so often, because when we build strategies, we're often in a headspace of being quite ambitious and we're dreaming. Like, we can take that mindset into our action taken and be a little bit naive and go, well, I've built the plan. I've got the strategy. I'm going to do it. It's going to happen. Like, it's just not the case. We are humans before we are business owners. We're not superheroes. Things get in the way, whether it be mindset, time related, distractions, habits that we have. And I think we need to really question what's going to get in the way and how can I help myself with that.
Yeah.
Set yourself up to take action. Don't assume it's going to happen. Think about that intentionally.
Yeah.
And I think the second big thing, and I feel like both of these are probably big topics within themselves, but is then really adopting a mindset of experimentation and curiosity.
Yes.
The goal is not to then live in external action forever. We should take external action so we can go back to the internal action and make it better.
Yes.
Right? Every piece of action you take gives you clarity, but you only learn if you take time to learn.
Yeah.
I always find it fascinating. If I sit and do a reflection, I've just sat and done a reflection on my book launch actually, and I got so much from it. So many things that I was like, oh, that's going to help me with my business moving forwards. That worked, that didn't. And I was like, gosh, I've just been sat on those learnings. If I hadn't have sat down and tried to gather them, they never would have improved anything. And so I think we've really got to take the action, but take it with real curiosity and try and learn. Because, thinking back to what we were just talking about a minute ago, when you're in the messy middle where you're taking the action and you're not seeing any results, the worst thing you can do is just keep taking the same piece of action. Yes, be consistent, but don't be constant. Like, take a piece of action and think, okay, what did I learn from that?
Yeah.
How can I take a better piece of action next time? And so, I think that's often the two things that I notice people need to think about is how do you help yourself take the action? And then how do you do it in a really curious, experimental way, which isn't easy because we love to be perfectionists, but you can't be a perfectionist when it comes to action taking.
No, exactly.
Doesn't go too well.
I think take messy action is one of the things that I've sort of heard you say quite a few times, and I'm definitely an advocate for that. And I think when you said at the beginning about setting yourself up for intention, it's definitely that. So set yourself up for intention and don't set yourself up for failure. So don't say, right, I'm going to be on every social media platform, I'm going to go to every networking event, I'm going to email my list 20 times a day, and then you sort of do everything for 3 or 4 days and then you stop and you just hide in a corner because nobody has that amount of energy. And that is just such a big thing to say, because when you dive into these things, you're like, oh yeah, but I want to do everything. So it's focusing on what the end goal is, focusing on what you can be doing, who you like working with, but what are the actions that you can take to get there, but taking those steps. And I think I've been very lucky in that I have been in the curious experimentation. I very much go, well, we'll give that a try. We'll lean into it. And then I start taking the action. I'm like, oh, this is actually slightly easier, or I quite like this direction, that direction. And I do have a story actually, which is quite similar to what you're going through, is that last year I started doing an ice bath challenge. And every day I had to get in the ice bath, and it was in March and it was snowing and it was quite cold. And I was like, right, this is what I want to do because I'm going to feel so much better after it. I'm going to feel this, feel that, vagus nerve, all these different things. That didn't help me. What helped me was talking to myself like a child. Because I did it as soon as I got up, 6:30 in the morning. I was like, all you need to do is get out of bed. All you need to do is just put your swimming costume on. All you need to do is find the keys. So I talked to myself in these very, very small steps, and I got in the ice bath every day, because those small steps, those tiny bits of action led to momentum. And it is relevant to business, because I've realized after that, that's the best way that I learn and I do things, is try that, take a little step forward. I've got the end goal in mind, but I can't think like exercise. I can't think, oh, I'm going to feel wonderful afterwards. I then do those small steps of, oh, just grab your gym bag, just get the keys. So these are like the internal things that I go through for the small steps to take me forward. And that from you, learning from you as well about taking messy action, taking those steps, leaning in, learning, and then reflecting on what works well and what didn't. I think that's the thing that lots of people miss out as well. Like, oh, somebody told me I should be doing this, so I'm doing it. I'm carrying on doing it. I'm not comfortable doing it, but I'm going to carry on doing it because they told me to, and then not learning.
Completely. I think we can go both ways, can't we? We can either be like too insistent on just keeping going, or we do it, like you said, we do something 3 times and go, oh, it didn't work, I need to stop. I think there's important thing to say here is I think with anything new, give it consistency before you judge it.
Yes.
So often people don't give a strategy or a thing the consistency it needs before they deem it a failure.
Yes.
People will do 2 ice baths and go, oh, it's not really for me.
Yeah.
Like, you got to put in the reps before you look at the results. And so I think that's true for anything. But I love that example there of how you break it down, because I think we do, that is exactly what we need to do. You know, the big goals feel intimidating, but they also feel quite hard to action. Like an action of do an ice bath this morning, it's not actually an action. You know, that's an end result. The action is, like you said, put on your swimming costume, get ready, go outside, blah, blah, blah. Like, you've got to think of yourself as a child, I think, a lot of the time to help yourself take that action. I'm also a massive advocate for sticker charts and reward charts. Like, at our core, I think we're all kids that miss having that, like,
that reward,
spoon-fed and those rewards.
Because we're not in employment where we don't have a manager saying, oh, well done, that was good, or your colleagues who are sat next to you.
So true.
So that is such a huge part of, I think, being an entrepreneur. You are in your own room or in your own office, and you are just learning and guessing and moving forward. And I do every Friday. I do the Friday wins, because I think we don't celebrate ourselves enough. And I want to talk about these are the wins, because for a long time I just sort of got to the goal and was like, well, I've done that goal, what's the next one? And was like, oh, well, I've on this uphill battle, I've got to step 10. Oh, well, okay, well, now I've got to get to step 30. And I never looked back and never celebrated. And now I force myself to do it. And now I can see that actually, look how far you've come. Because without that reflection, like you said before, without that reflection, you're just like, well, I'm kind of here now, but my goal's right up there. So I'm really struggling because I'm constantly feel like I'm on this uphill battle.
Yeah, really, I can completely resonate with that. Yeah, so much like personal reflection, isn't there, in doing this kind of work, is we're all so different. It's working out, what works for me, what doesn't, how can I help myself with that moving forwards. That's a great point.
Just moving on in terms of strategy. So we've got our internal whys. We know this is what we want to be doing. We've sort of worked on our mindset in terms of curiosity, experimentation. We kind of know, where we're going. What are some of the next steps that my listeners can take?
I think you just got to keep going. I don't think there's much more to it than that. It's build the plan. And I think part of what people find difficult is knowing when it's time to just almost settle and keep going. A lot of people want to keep coming back and, okay, I'm going to do another online course or another whatever, like build the plan. And it's like, actually, yes, maybe if you've not done it for 6 to 12 months, but actually if you've just done that work, like let it settle. The amount of people I speak to that tell me it's their like 8th time editing their website this year, or they're just tweaking their messaging, or they're just building it. And I just want to shake them and just be like, when are you going to take the action? Because I'm not going to lie to you, nothing's going to change unless that happens. And so I think it is then putting in that consistency and then working out, once you've taken enough of the action, when do you then come back and reflect and refine? I find a quarterly rhythm is so helpful in business. 3 months of consistency will teach you a lot. And so actually, if you have a rhythm where every 3 months you step back, you review, you reflect, you refine, you don't rip everything up, but you just make some of those tweaks and changes and have a check-in with yourself. I think that kind of keeps that strategy up to date, but doesn't keep you jumping back to it every time you get a bit overwhelmed or scared. Because I think if we're being honest, that's often why we do it, isn't it? Is we go, oh, it's getting a bit uncomfortable, or it's getting a bit boring, or I'm getting a bit nervous. Okay, I'll come and, learn more or prep more or think more. And actually we just have to keep at it as we go. And obviously the joy of then taking action is we get to learn from it. And then your strategies improve. And in business, I'm constantly surprised. I don't often know what something's going to lead to. So when I take a few months of consistent action, I'm always so positively surprised by often what that will lead to. Like my book's a good example of that. I didn't go out wanting to write a book. That book deal was offered to me, and that wasn't, it was a bit of luck, but it wasn't purely chance. That was from a previous strategy that was implemented consistently enough. So I think that's when it starts to get fun, isn't it? It's when you start to see like the return on that work. And as you said, take the time to celebrate those wins as well, because that's a huge part of it. We have to acknowledge our progress. We're so quick to just think, okay, I need to improve the strategy and move forwards, before going, oh my gosh, how amazing that I'm at a point where I'm ready to improve the strategy. Isn't that a great sign of everything I've done so far?
And can you just tell us your celebratory writing? What do you write on because with your big goals? Because I think that's a really brilliant one that I want to start doing, and I haven't done it yet. So do you want to share how you celebrate your big goals?
Yes. So if there's two things that's true about me, I love rosé wine,
Yep.
and I'm rubbish at celebrating wins.
Yep.
So I was thinking, how do I just combine these two things in a positive way? And yeah, I write my goals onto bottles of alcohol. The irony is I'm now alcohol free most of the time, so it's not quite the booze it used to be. But yeah, it was actually something my partner and I did, must have been about a year and a half ago now, when we first moved in together. We sat down and we wrote some goals and individual ones and ones together. And actually we did it. It was a bit of fun, but it was so helpful for me. Like the initial goals I think I wrote for me personally were around, it was like a health goal, publishing the book and it being a bestseller. And then what was the other one? A certain launch target that I had. And actually, over the last year, all of those have happened. And I do think a big part of that is my goals were so visible.
Yes.
You know, those bottles are up on our kitchen shelf and we've moved house and they've gone straight back up already. We're mid-renovation, but they're up on the kitchen shelf because I just love to see them.
Yeah.
Because they give me that visual reminder, and they also give me a forced moment of reflection where I go, oh my gosh, we get to open it now. You know, one of our joint ones was buy a house. And the day we moved in here, we opened it, and then what we do is once you've achieved it, we then leave the empty bottles up on another shelf. So you kind of have this constant visual reminder as well of like, I've done good things, you know, I've achieved in the past, so maybe this next one I set I can achieve as well. So actually it's something I'm going to be doing over the next month. I've kind of worked through those ones, is write a few new ones, because I think it's a really nice habit to have. And I think otherwise the wins just pass you by, don't they? And you just don't take them in, and you think about the next one. And obviously that's part of what makes us successful, is we always think about the next thing. But yeah, it's nice, I think, to have a moment of going, oh my gosh, I did it. Like past me dreamt of this.
Yes.
I think we forget that. Once you've achieved it, it feels so easy. We should go, actually, past me really wanted this. How cool that I've got it.
That is a brilliant way to celebrate goals and celebrate wins. And yeah, I'm definitely going to be implementing that. But yeah, I don't really drink. So I'm like, how can I do that? Maybe I'll do like chocolate or something. Do something. But I think similar, like having that visual representation, like you said, up on the shelf where it is, that's your goal, but also they're the goals that I've achieved. So you've got that evidence that you can do it. And you said something else as well that definitely resonated with me, was you've done the courses, you've done the challenges, you've learned and learned and learned, and now it's time to take the action. Because I was very much in I'm going to carry on doing a course, I'm not sure, I don't have the confidence, I don't, a bit of imposter syndrome. So I did course after course after course after course, and then I got to the point was like, I know what I'm doing. I just need to take the action. Even though I'd heard you say it many, many times, it's that thing of you still like, oh, but Alice means somebody else. Alice isn't talking about me. I'm the one who needs to do 20 more courses and then I can start taking the action. But actually it's taking the action, then you can learn from it and get the evidence that you can do it and you know what you're doing. But also you've got, like you said, you lean into what you enjoy doing, and opportunities might come up. So now I'm in a place where I'm happy to be putting myself up for speaking events, whereas 5 years ago the idea of speaking in front of a group would have been absolutely terrifying. But because you've taken those steps over the years, it's not as scary as it would have been 5 years ago.
I love that. You've got to go through it to learn it sometimes, haven't you? You can hear it and go like, yeah, that sounds true for someone else, like you said, but then you sometimes have to live it and go, okay, yeah, that was true for me as well.
Yeah, it is. I think, like you said, it's experimentation, learning, pushing through, knowing why you want to be doing something and having that internal why, and knowing what your goals are and taking those steps towards it. This has been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Alice. So what I usually do at the end of the podcast is just to talk through 3 actions that people can take right now. As we've been talking about, it's all about taking action. So up to 3 actions that people can go away with and take to move their business forward. So could you give us sort of 2 or 3 actions that they can go away with?
Absolutely. I'd say even just from what we've spoken about, I think one action is always just bring yourself back to that internal and external why. And I'm going to give a big preface here. Doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need to sit down. Don't go to a coffee shop and light a candle and get a new journal. Like if you want to do that, crack on. But like I'm talking messy, right? Mine's a notes app on my phone situation most of the time. I'm just scribbling it down, reminding myself of it. It doesn't go in some fancy Notion board. I'm just getting the thoughts somewhere. So I'd say that's one action you can take. 5 minutes. Why do I do it for me? Why do I do it for others? Because it changes, it evolves. Yes. You need to come back to that fairly often. Another action I'd say for people to take is to look at Is there an area in your business where you haven't asked why before you built the plan? And if so, go and ask why. Particularly marketing, if I can direct anyone anywhere, that's usually where this happens. People do things from a place of should. I should be on TikTok. I should have a podcast. I should do email marketing. I should have a new website. Maybe, but I want you just to question all those things. Like really look through each platform you're on with a fine-tooth comb of like, what does this do for me?
Yes.
Is this bringing something clear to my business? Is this meeting someone on their journey with me? Is this proving to work? Or if it's not yet proving, can I see how it could prove to work? And maybe see if you could take a few things out of the mix. I always love when I can do that. I think actually a lot of my work as a strategist is telling people to do less, but with more intention. So I'd say that's the second exercise. And then I think the third exercise, which links to what we're just talking about, have a moment of celebrating some of the wins that you've had recently. Big, small, internal, external. Sometimes all my wins that I can gather together are like, I made it through this week, or I showed up to that thing, or I've kept going. That like, I have a habit every time that I'm filling my car with petrol, you know, that boring 2 minutes where you just stood there, like you can't go on your phone because then everything will blow up. So you just have to stand there in silence. Every time I pump petrol, I do gratitude lists in my head. And it's the only time I do gratitude lists. I'm not very good at like daily journaling or anything. And I just stand there and I put my petrol in my car and I just list out in my head, I'm grateful for this and I'm grateful for that. And I'm glad for this and I'm proud of that. So like whatever kind of habit you want to build, have a moment of like reflection and praise, because it sounds fluffy, right? It sounds like a fun, nice thing to do to celebrate your wins. But actually it's really fundamental. When you celebrate a win, you back up your identity. And when your identity is stronger, you take more bold action.
Yes.
Knowing that you're good isn't just about stroking your ego. It's about trusting yourself more.
No. Oh, there you are. I don't know. You disappeared. Or did I?
It just disappeared. Took me away. I can pick up where I left off. You'll be able to piece it together. Knowing that you're good actually really then helps you move forwards in a more intentional way. So yeah, those would be my 3 actions: internal, external, why, review a plan and question if everything's got a clear intention, and celebrate some wins. I mean, I'm listing those and I'm like, I feel like I could do all of those today probably, and that would be helpful for me. So there you go.
That's brilliant. Thank you. The only thing is I have an electric car and I'm like, oh, that just charges itself. But I do the gratitude on the dog walk. That's what I do. So a few minutes, that's what, you know, that's what I do. I do exactly the same thing. Like those are absolutely brilliant actions. So thank you so much for that, Alice. And just to sort of round things off, where can people come and find more about you? I will put all your links in the show notes, but where can they find you?
Thank you. So my main hangout's probably Instagram and LinkedIn. People can find me just by searching Alice Benham. Benham, like a man called Ben eating ham, easiest way to remember that. I've got my own podcast. I've had it for the last 5 years. So there's about 280 episodes if people want to have a dive in there. There's episodes I've made kind of sharing my expertise, but also a load of episodes with other business owners kind of unpacking their stories and journeys. My website's kind of got all the information around the work that I do. It's just alicebenham.co.uk, and that's also where people can buy my book if they're interested. That's me.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really loved this.
Oh, thank you so much for coming, Alice. It's been absolutely brilliant.